started.
Welcome to the Go With Your Gut podcast,
Thinking
a podcast
internally,
to help you manage your
looking inside
mindset.
who I was,
Because if you
doing
don't
that.
manage your
Welcome
mind,
to
the Go With Your Gut
control you.
podcast with
A
speaker,
podcast to
help
writer,
you manage your
creator,
mindset, Lauren Dreyer.
Because
Because if you don't manage your mind, it'll control you. With speaker, writer, and creator, Lauren Dreyer.
So who do I Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Go With Your Gut podcast. As you know, I am your host, Lauren Dreyer, and today we have a amazing guest, Bryan Ashworth. And you've heard me talk a little bit before on Activate Your Power Now, as well as Becoming the Best You. And that is where I know Bryan from. And he has a incredible story, and we're going to get a little bit of a piece of it today. So, Bryan, I will have you jump right in and welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks, Lauren. It's a pleasure. It's always been a pleasure knowing you. So a little bit about me. Thank you for having me on the show. How long have we been at BTB Wine House? It's been about a year or so.
Something like
I
that.
think I've been around about a year.
Yep.
Yeah. So I've been in Kansas City now for, almost 5-6 years. Speaker, coach, consultant is my background, operations primarily. And I love helping people be efficient, whether it's in their business or their life. How can they tap into their resources to accomplish what they need to or desire or want to accomplish and be most efficient in that. So that's kind of in a very small nutshell about me.
All right. Thank you for that. And you always have a very interesting and different perspective, which I'm sure we will get from you, which I always do appreciate. So we're going to jump right into talking about you a little bit. So what has been a time for you where you have had to choose to listen to that gut instinct, and it was scary, but you went with it and it worked out?
That is a great question. This is a tough one because I grew up in a home where, let me just preface by saying I think our parents, generally speaking, they did the best they could do with what they had, right? My parents were children having children.
Yeah.
And it was a very financially, stressful home, very tight. Dad worked, mom didn't. There's 3 of us kids. And so all those pressures, in addition to the lack of, maybe I would say, emotional capacity to just deal with those pressures, created a situation in my home where, whether this was said or not, in those moments of pressure, children should be seen and not heard. And so anytime that I would have, an intuitive thought or an idea or whatever, a lot of times it was squelched, or at least from my perspective. And because we as children, we don't really develop, or we don't have, if no one ever teaches us how to interpret the world,
Yep.
then we fill in the blanks with what makes sense in our tiny little mind. And so I took that narrative throughout my childhood into adulthood, that if I wanted to be accepted, I better conform to what I think other people, or I think other people want from me. So I squelched my inner voice, and I let what I perceived my circumstances and what other people wanted to be the voice for me. So it's been a very long, kind of arduous road to really relearn and trust my own voice again. And I remember back when I first came to Kansas City, I came up here as an area manager over 3 accounts across the city. I had over 100 employees. It was the most money I've ever made at a time in my life. And I was really good at what I did. I got turnover. My numbers were great. I mean, these accounts were bleeding red, losing money when I came up here. And I came up here and really just cleaned them up and staffed them and got turnover down and retention up and made them profitable. But in order to do that, it like to kill me. I mean, I partnered with organizations across the city and immigration programs in a company van, and was getting up at 3 in the morning and Ubering all employees to work that couldn't have a driver's license, do my job, and then go pick them up, take them home. So I was like 3 in the morning until 8 or 9 o'clock at night was my day for a couple of years. And so it wore me out. And I had an opportunity to leave that job and go start a business with a friend of mine. And I never started a business before. And I was so entrenched in the security of what I know, even though it was killing me. And so it was a really hard decision. And so this was the moment, kind of the transition of learning my voice again. It's like I knew something inside me was saying, I need to go. But everything outside of me, and even also internally, like there's this tug of war, like, no, you have to stay, or how are you going to pay your bills? How are you going to support your family? How? So that was very hard for me to trust and listen in the midst of all the fear and anxiety around it, to put in that notice and leave that job that I have, had made the most money at that point, and walk into something that I'd never done before, that was no guarantee of making any money for any given period of time.
That's
And I did
terrifying.
it. Oh my gosh. My wife was not happy.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
So that took absolutely incredible guts to do that, and to learn to trust that piece of you that knew that it's something that you had to do, because not having that definitive sense of security of, I have bills to pay, I have a family to support, all of those things, like that's what, and I mean this in no bad way, that's what stops a lot of people from taking the chance and taking that leap and saying, okay, I'm going to trust that, what I'm doing is going to pay off in the long run. So you mentioned that came with a lot of fear, anxiety, all of those good things that tear you up inside, but nobody can see them because we tend to put a front up. Talk to us a little bit about how you dealt with that and how you got through it, because that's truly what we do, is move through it. We don't usually get to just leave it behind.
Well, let me say, I don't sweep things under the rug very well, and my emotions are on my sleeve. So anytime that and you've probably experienced this, anytime that I'm sad, depressed, anxious, whatever it is, I show it. The only caveat to that is there are times when, I've been excited about things, and I only get like really super, like kid on Christmas morning excited about going fishing and things like that, but
Yeah.
And closing big deals. But there are times when I'm like really just happy and excited, and somebody's like, "Well, tell your face." So that's like the one time. It's probably the one off. But you know, I want to come back to personalities. I think it really has to do with personality, and there's a lot of debate. We can have a lot of
Yeah.
conversation on, what impresses on a person to form or shape their personality. There's a lot of theory on that. I believe that we are all born with, uh, whether you want to say God-given gifts or talents or passions, and those can be nurtured or those can be squelched. Yep. as we grow up. And so I've had to learn. And when I say passions, I'm not talking about things I'm just get excited about.
Sure.
Right. I say, people say I love pizza. Well, does that mean you're really passionate about pizza? I mean, I say I love fishing. I am passionate about fishing. But when I talk about passions, I'm talking about more something innate inside of you. Like, yep. And when we talk about going with your gut and we talk about taking those risks, I mean, that's to kind of frame this, I have a passion assessment that kind of measures passions. You and I have
Yep.
talked about this.
Yep.
I think we've actually gone through this with you. And so through the entrepreneur quadrant are certain passions. And so when we talk about tranquility is the higher the tranquility, the more you value that, the more security you want, the lower the tranquility, then obviously the more risk taker you're going to be. And so I have a huge aversion to risk. I'm a huge risk taker. That's what makes me. Not everybody's that way.
Yep.
So, to sit and kind of look at the landscape and so, oh, well, you're afraid, so you're not taking action. Maybe you're not. Maybe that's how you are innately designed. And or maybe something has happened in your life that has squelched your passion and you're afraid to take that. So it's not, a one size fits all kind of application. I
Yep.
think there's many ways that you could view that. But for me, I've just always been one, if you tell me no, I'm going to prove you wrong. I've always kind of had that chip on my shoulder. And I value my relationships and my family. Like I feel I have a deep responsibility to support and care for those that are in my care, wife, family. And so I take on that stress. And so if I'm in that position, like I'm going to do everything I can to try to meet that expectation and fill that need. So I'm not quite sure if I fully answered your question.
You did in a rather unexpected way, but a little bit of what I kind of want to cover is trying to figure out how to word this in a good way. When you get all of that internal emotions, I know you said you wear it on your sleeve, as do I. How do you mentally work through that? Like, I know you can have all of the personality traits and everything, and that is a much deeper conversation.
Mhm.
But you have a much different perspective being a male who wears your emotions on your sleeve, but you also are ingrained with that sense of head of the household, take care of my people, which is a great thing, but it also puts a large weight on you. So when you have to make those big decisions and you're thinking, okay, I'm a risk taker, but I also have these responsibilities. Like, to me, that kind of signals a little bit of a war going on inside your head, thinking which one's going to win? How do I make that best decision and how do I move forward? So how would you kind of describe that internal process?
Well, I think this could be a much deeper conversation. And I might use some language that might be a little bit unfamiliar to you or the
Okay.
audience. Being an efficiency guy, I'm always looking at metrics and numbers and things that make
Yep.
sense, right?
Sure.
And when I'm looking at a business, any action that you take, the question is how does this going to serve my business?
Sure.
Is this going to move the needle forward, right?
Sure.
Is it going to make me money? How does it impact my bottom line? Is really the question.
Yep.
Take that and move it to your personal life, right?
Okay.
I think so many times because of the culture sometimes we grow up in, as a child, we are conditioned. You better share your toy. You better not, don't be
Yeah.
selfish.
Yeah.
And we frame this idea and definition of what selfish is, and then we feel guilty for doing something for ourselves.
Absolutely.
It's so polarized, right?
Yep.
And but why is it okay in business and it's not okay in your life? And so I've learned, and I even help people and say, um, in business, they say pay yourself first, right?
Yep.
I don't live by the traditional accounting method. It's profit first. If you don't have profit, what are you doing in business, right? If you're doing personal finance, some gurus will say pay yourself first. I think that's good, right? Savings account.
Sure.
But what about just personal life in general? Take care of yourself first. We are conditioned that I'm to give and help other people. All that's great stuff. But if you're not taking care of you, what bucket are you giving from?
Yeah.
Right. So when I have these challenges, and I'm like, all these things weighing on me, and I have all these decisions and all these things that need to be done. Number one, which one's going to serve me? Which one is going to best support me in my self-care? And so what is my return on that? Because if I'm going to spend time, energy, or money in whatever this is in front of me, that's an investment. So what's my return on that investment? My ROI, right? And if
Yep.
I have things competing in my life and I don't know which one to choose, then here's a term that many people aren't maybe familiar with. I just learned it a few years ago in doing some LED lighting projects, and that's internal rate of return.
Okay.
In other words, if I have competing projects, there has to be a way to measure these projects or these decisions against themselves to prioritize them in a way. Which one's going to serve me more? And sometimes if I have things competing and I'm in the dust storm of all of it, I can't see the forest from the trees.
Yep.
Right. So there has to be a way I can compare these competing things against each other to say this is priority over that. So an example would be in a business. They need new lighting. They need air conditioner, their parking lot redone, right? And you can weigh those things based on different categories, right? The air conditioner, your employee, if you don't fix the air conditioner and your employees are probably not going to work in that environment and leave, and then how does that going to impact your bottom line?
Yep.
Right. So you could make the argument by fixing the air conditioner doesn't directly make you money, but indirectly, if you handle it well and you're treating your people well, it's gonna pay off.
Yep.
Right. If you do your lighting, if you convert old technology to LED, it's going to save you huge on utility bill. So that's another way, right? You can easily measure a rate of return because it's going to directly save you money, which saved money is earned by, right? It's retained earnings, right?
Yep.
And I'm not spending it on something else. And so I can measure these things and say, based on the utility, based on the direct impact on the bottom line or myself, I can then, by asking myself specific questions, get a clear understanding of which things competing in my life take priority over the other. And that helps me to focus rather than get distracted with all these things around me. Right. So
Yep.
that's what I do. That's one of the ways that I do that. And in the process of that, emotionally, it's walking through your own thinking and keeping yourself in the right headspace. And so if I'm not in the right headspace, I'm not going to be able to do all that anyway to make the right decisions
Yep.
and compare. So it may sound like a lot, but practice is progress, right? And so this has been a journey for me over a lifetime.
Yeah. And actually, you just explained that beautifully. And because I think so many people have conflict and confusion of like, well, all these things are priorities. All these things need to come first. When in reality, when you are able to weigh those different things and say, okay, here's what my number one priority needs to be. When you start at point A and just pick one thing to focus on, even though everything else still needs to be done, your brain can get a little bit more clear. And a lot of times those other things tend to bleed into each other, and it kind of almost fixes the other in a sense. Not to say that they don't all need some different attention, and once you take care of one, you don't have to take care of anything else. But I think that's a great way to explain even things in personal life too, because we want to focus on all these different things. And when you can have mental clarity over picking that one thing and saying, okay, this is where I'm going to be, instead of trying to focus on all the different things and not being great at any of them,
Right.
then you can place your time and effort where it's going to give you the best ROI, right? The best.
Right.
And then in return, it also turns into a little bit of that self-care. And I love the way that you also explain that, because self-care to me is such a trendy phrase, such a trigger phrase for a lot of people. And like self-care for you is different from self-care for me. And I think when people hear the term self-care, it has to be, go get a massage, or, we put a label on what that needs to be, when it looks absolutely different for everybody. Heck, depending on the day, let's be honest.
Right.
So I'm kind of curious as to, I know you've come a long way just from me getting to know you a little bit. How do you put all the different practices into your life right now to actually utilize them?
Great question. I think you've already answered your question, but I'll take what you said and just kind of break it down, right? Because you said that when you focus on one thing, naturally the end result is all these other things are impacted or affected, right?
Yep.
Because we don't live in a silo.
Right.
Right? We don't live in a vacuum.
Yep.
Right? Life is not in that. So I often will ask business owners, again, for example, because it's life, right? I mean, whether you are a husband in your home or a wife in your home, or a mother in your home, a sister, aunt, brother, uncle, whatever, or
Yep.
business owner, right? You are who you are wherever you go.
Right.
And if you're doing your work, then number one, you choose how you show up, right? And you're choosing how you interact in each of those roles.
Yep.
Right. So if I asked you, regardless of what role you're in, and I said, let's take business, for example, because a lot of times I'll ask business owners, I'm going to give you kind of a list to choose from. You can pick one to focus on of what you believe is most important. Okay. Sales, revenue, relationships, growth. Let's just do those four. Okay. Uh, revenue, sales, growth, relationships. What would you choose?
Hands down, relationships.
Most of the time, that's what people say. If you're a business owner, oftentimes they say sales. I said, okay, how are you job costing your projects? How are you pricing your product or service? Because if you're not job costing or pricing well, you could have a million sales. If you're not making money, sales don't mean anything to you.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
So let's just take that one out. You can look at revenue. Revenue doesn't mean anything if you don't have any retained earnings. If you're spending every penny that comes in, revenue doesn't mean anything, right?
Yep.
So there's a deeper problem there too. So let's move that one out. Relationships. Most people, if they don't choose sales, they'll choose relationships. And I say, okay, great. I believe in relationship. But what if that relationship doesn't have a need right now that I can meet?
Okay.
And time has sometimes, depending on who people are and how the relationship is established and how we define relationships, right?
Yeah.
If the relationship is just a means to an end, then that's really not a relationship.
Yeah.
So real relationships take time.
Yep.
And we don't have time to build long-term relationships that we really want to desire and connect in to support our business, right?
Yep.
So that's out. There's only one thing left, and that's growth. Because I believe if you focus on one thing, you focus on growth, to your point, relationships, sales, revenue, all those other things take care of themselves. Because as you focus on growth personally and in your business, as you grow, you're growing in all those other areas of your life, because again, you impact all those areas of your life. You are
Yep.
who you are, and we're not in a silo.
That's true.
So I focus on growth. I read books. Every time I get in the truck, I got to drive to Kearney today to go look at some roofs. I'm listening to podcasts. I'm listening to
Yep.
books on Audible, right? There's so many things we can do to begin growth in ourselves,
Yep.
change our perspective in our business. Just because it worked 20 years ago doesn't mean it works today.
Yep.
Being open-minded to think of other methodologies or theories or principles that we can employ and implement.
Yep.
That's what I do.
I love that. Love that. And, you know, I think that leads great into, you already just gave us all the tips and tricks of what we should do. So, Bryan, tell us how we can find you.
Well, people think I'm crazy for doing this, but I do it, and no one has ever yet taken me up on it.
Okay.
You can call or text me,
Oh,
and my number is 913-333-7670. I put my phone number out there. People, I mean, their jaws hit the floor. They're like, I would never. I'm like, you could call me at 3 in the morning. My phone's on do not disturb. You're not going to bother me, right? So I don't mind that. And if you call me and harass me, or I can block you. It's not a big deal. My email is one of my emails, Bryan@thestairwell.org. You go to my website, thestairwell.org. There's right now, there's, for a short limited time, a free full passion assessment. You can click on the get started button, put in your info, it will redirect you. You can have a full free passion assessment. Then reach out to me, email me, call me, text me. Let's do a 15-minute complimentary debrief, get to know each other. And if you want to help from that point, then we can do that. But that's a great way to get a hold of me.
well, there you have it. You can text him straight on, and yeah, I don't think anybody's ever done that before, so I will give you props for that. Oh, that's funny. Well, everybody, you've heard it straight from Bryan here that going with your gut is not always the easy thing, and it's going to leave you with some hard decisions, but it is always worth it. It's going to be hard, but it is always worth it. So guys, go with your gut and then keep going.